All right, Joe, rapid fire. When Chinese media refers to the two establishes, what are they talking about?
Two establishes?
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
Four consciousnesses. Again, these are kind of rough translations. You'll have to forgive it, but
I feel like I've heard that in the past before, but I clearly don't know the answer.
four confidences, separate one.
Oh, definitely don't know that.
That's a different one. All right. What is the North Star, would you say, for China's overall goal? If you look at their 5-year plan and they say, this is our North Star, if you had to summarize it from their perspective, what is it?
Stability.
Oh, okay. China in the 5-year plan says it has a problem with choke points and blockages in their economy. Do you know what they're talking about? What could that mean?
Like physical, like actual physical, like infrastructure, or just like the composition of the economy and society.
Maybe. Is that your answer or is that a question?
Their choke point is not getting consumers to spend enough.
What is China's national unemployment rate? National unemployment rate.
That I do not know at all.
Here's a quick preview. No one knows what that one is. They don't publish it. They only do urban. So that was kind of a trick question. Sorry about that. How much is the Chinese population expected to decline by 2050?
10 to 20%.
Whoa. Okay. Actually,
5 to 10.
Actually, that's about right. China's listed 3 key risk areas in their economy. What are they?
Housing. I'm not sure.
Hopefully there's going to be a few things I can teach you and show you today. Did a lot of research. We got China's 5-year plan came out. I mentioned it last time. Wasn't able to really dig into it. I spent the last week looking at it. Grok and I took a close look at it. The question I wanted to have answered is, what are the problems China thinks that it's facing? From the Chinese perspective, what are the biggest problems it has? There's like one paragraph in there that we're going to look at really closely near the front. I'm calling it the bull bear paragraph because it gives the case for the bulls and the bears in one paragraph. And I'll just preface by saying that I personally am quite bullish on China. I think it's really just a matter of time before they eclipse the US. And the primary reason just being its sheer size, just the sheer number of people. There is a little caveat to that, which is all bets are off if we really do have those robots being produced. And we can't have robots making robots, and then all bets are off. But as it stands now, the fundamentals are just so incredibly strong. So with that said, if that's my position, kind of bullish, it would be instructive to me to try to state the bear argument, just kind of for my own personal education. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I know you are very bearish on China.
Oh, bearish.
Bearish. You're not very, but that is one of the kind of disagreements that we have. So I'm going to try to articulate maybe more your side of the argument. And also it's just kind of juicy. If there's definitely been a confrontational stance, let's say, taken between China and the US. And as an American on the US side, it is kind of nice to read about all the problems that your quote unquote adversary has. So from that perspective, it's also just kind of a nice thing to read about. Another thing I'll say real quick is normally we cover economics, finance, monetary policy in the US and things like that. We're both finance professionals. So you might be asking yourself, what is this guy doing looking into China? I'll just say it's a personal interest of mine. I majored in economics and Chinese. I spent a semester in China when I was in high school, when I was in college, and then 4 years I lived there right after university where I was a market analyst. I could say I speak Chinese. I spoke Chinese definitely at one point in my life very well, used it at work and all that stuff. So I definitely I like to look over there every once in a while. So before we get into the bull bear paragraph, I want to ask you, I think Chinese Incorporated, you've heard that term? It's almost as though the entire country is one big company, but every great company needs a mission, right? Needs a mission statement. And in China, I asked you what it is. You said it was stability. That was your answer. That's a pretty good answer. Well, they they write. So I would probably highlight this paragraph over here as being their mission. I mean, what is their guiding principles? So I'm gonna. It's very long, and let's just look through it real quick. Here we go. We must adhere to Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, the theory of three represents, and the scientific outlook on development. Fully implement Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. Thoroughly implement the spirit of the 20th CPC National Congress and its subsequent plenary sessions. Earnestly implement the arrangements of the fourth plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee, focus on building a modern socialist country in all respects and achieving the second centenary goal, comprehensively advance the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese-style modernization, coordinate the overall layout of the five-sphere integrated plan and the strategic layout of the, quote, four comprehensives, end quote, coordinate the domestic, and it just goes on like this. And I think that at good companies with a good strategy and management, one of the important things to do is to set up just very clear goals. And I would argue, first and foremost, that this is not particularly clear. I mean, if I had to summarize kind of what their goal was, I sort of highlighted it here. Probably it's around fully implement Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, whatever that exactly means. Building perhaps a modern socialist country in all respects. That's like the just ultimate goal. Advance the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese-style modernization. I think that would probably be a good summary. I think ultimately, I think they got somewhat of a muddled North Star. It might just be to be number one. Might just be another interpretation, another way to put it. I'll add I think, one of the great things that I think Musk does is he has a very good job of setting up a North Star for the company. And he's able to just identify just clear metrics, just one thing that they're trying to strive for, that the entire company, as he'll say, is just a bunch of vectors and you want to get them pointing in the same direction. It's what is that direction? And for X, it was to maximize the amount of unregretted user minutes. And that's a clear, succinct, pretty well-defined metric. Not great. I mean, if there's some criticism, it would be measuring unregret might be difficult. But otherwise, I like it. He can communicate that up and down in an organization. Meanwhile, kind of companies with poor management, the guiding star, the North Star, can be kind of muddled, or they'll try to do everything. They just want everything good. They can't respect the fact that you pull one lever, often another one goes down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can't just say fix everything.
Yeah, you got their gives and takes. And a very important way to navigate that is just to know what the ultimate goal is. And that makes sometimes decisions much, much easier. I mean, I imagine, for instance, being president of the United States would be very difficult. But if I were president, I would try to remember back to what would be the guiding North Star if you were president? Joe.
America number one.
America number one. I mean, I would look back to the oath that you take, which is uphold the Constitution. That's probably where I would start.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, I put you on the spot a little bit, Joe. And apologies. Now, the other thing is, I mentioned Elon Musk's use of a metric. Well, they also have metrics. China also has metrics. And why don't we look at the guiding metrics? This is what they're trying to hit over the 5 years. I would argue that this is their North Star. So they got a couple segments here. Economic development. The metrics that they're looking at is GDP. So this has got a bunch of news lately. They're just going 5. And then 2030, they don't actually put a percentage growth number. They just say maintain within reasonable range, proposed annually as appropriate. And that got a lot of brouhaha because they're no longer, so they're giving themselves some wiggle room. The other economic development one, overall labor productivity growth, 6.1, and their guiding number for the kind of the annual cumulative is just higher than GDP growth. Is an interesting one for economic development. Urbanization rate of permanent resident population. So they just want to continue to urbanize, and this has been, a key driver of their growth. Urbanization. Current 2025 is 67.9%. They want to get that up to 71%. Sure. Next segment or category is innovation driven. And they have three metrics or indicators. One is growth in total society R&D expenditure. And they want sort of an annual average or cumulative of greater than 7%. So this is kind of a funny metric. I think it's kind of a crap metric because it's not really results oriented. It's just, okay.
Spending oriented.
Just spending oriented, which, form over function. I mean, how easy would it be for everyone? It was shit. Give me 10%. I could make that. Just give me the money. I'll spend it on R&D. No problem. Actually seeing results and getting some innovation on the other end is different. Same thing with high value invention patents per 10,000 people. That's kind of interesting. Right now it's 16. They want to get to over 22. A
little more reasonable, but
that's a little more reasonable. A little at least more results. Someone's actually looking at the patent and giving it to them.
Right, but at the same time, it's like if you have these targets, do you dilute what counts as a patent?
Right. Or maybe it's just patents for bullshit inventions. Just like,
right, yeah.
Solar powered flashlight. No one's thought of that. No batteries. I'd be curious to look at the patent office, and then all of a sudden at the end, like in 2029 or something, you just get flooded these crap patents for just nonsense. Next one is the share of core digital economy industries in GDP percentage. This one, I guess, would be difficult to fudge as well. Right now it's 10.5%. And I think that asterisk means it's as of 2024. And then they want to get it up to 12.5%. So that's also another one you can't really fudge unless you start messing with the definitions.
That one seems more reasonable compared to the other two that we just talked about, because there's more like a real outcome.
So people's livelihoods and well-being is the next one. We're not going to read all of them. A couple of the one are close to sort of econ, what we're talking about. Here's the urban surveyed unemployment rate. And 5.2 is where it is now. And they're hoping for just to maintain less than 5.5. But again, they actually, this is for urban. This doesn't include rural. The growth in per capita disposable income of residents, they want it to keep it in sync with GDP growth. Right? That's pretty important. I think this is almost a little nod towards income inequality, I would argue.
Yeah, definitely.
Average years of schooling they have, the medical and health personnel per 1,000 people they have for practicing physicians and registered nurses. They have proportion of nursing type beds in elderly care institutions. You can imagine all these numbers they want to increase. So the next one, the increase in enrollment rate for infants, toddlers under 3. I think that's part of their plan to try to increase fertility. You'll see that later because they know that there's a population wave coming where there's going to be a lot of young people supporting a very old population and then a decline in just the overall population. And they know that. I think that's a huge problem. Then they have a section on green low carbon and they have security guarantee. A security guarantee is kind of interesting because they say grain and energy. Those are the two main things to look at for their security.
Like you said last time, you got to have that grain in there just as a nod towards socialism's past.
I mean, we're on the 15th one here. They've been doing this for 75 years. You got to keep the grain. Yeah, so I would argue all that we were talking about, those are the North Stars, I would say.
Yeah, on the whole seems pretty reasonable. It seems like there's definitely a couple in there that you could fudge along the way, but it's a lot clearer than that first paragraph.
All right. The next thing I wanted to show you earlier in here, I want to talk about just the political loyalty and idealistic purity. And outside reading in, just looking at this, I got to say, Xi Jinping sounding a little desperate. Joe, could you, why don't you do me a favor, just for this next bit, talking about political loyalty and idealistic purity. Could you read the highlighted bit I got here?
Changes bring opportunities and challenges inspire fighting spirit. Faced with the ever-changing international landscape and various risks and challenges, we must deeply understand the decisive significance of the, quote, two establishments, quote, strengthen the four consciousnesses.
And not a word you say a whole lot.
I know.
Plural of consciousness.
You heard me stumble a little bit there.
Yeah.
How many consciousnesses do you typically deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, luckily half.
I'm only at one.
On a good day. Yeah.
Yes. Firm up the four confidences, a little easier to pronounce, and achieve the two safeguards.
All right. So what is that? I got a little kind of screenshot here. Those are the 2个确立. So those are the two establishes. The first one is establish Comrade Xi Jinping core position in the party central committee and the party as a whole. Number two, establish the guiding role of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. So the four consciousnesses are political, overall, the big picture. Three is core. Four is alignment. So the political one, you got to view everything through a political lens. All work has to serve the party's overall political goals. Two is the big picture. So subordinating, local or departmental interests to the broader strategic interests of the country and party center. So I think like one of the things when you read through this, you can definitely see at its very core the just psychological or even just philosophical differences that are between sort of the West and the East really come to the fore here, where the idea of the East sort of talking about overall harmony of an entire society and sort of your role in protecting the collective versus what the West has, which is much more individual focused, individual liberties and stuff like that. And like something is so crystal clear, and how at the end of the day, that's I think what the question ultimately comes down to are values. If you want to get married and you want to try to decide who you want to be with for the rest of your life, what do you look at? I remember my dad said you want to look at two things. You want to look for values and competence. So you want to find someone that sort of shares your values, and then competence. In the same way, you can look at an entire society, kind of Western versus Chinese, and say, what are their values? And the values here, when you read through this, are just starkly different. Could you imagine like the U.S. government coming out and saying stuff like this? It wouldn't fly.
Well, maybe on the DEI motivated parties.
Yeah, that are arguably. Well, Joe, you keep trying to pull me down this just deep dark hole.
Just lob things at you. See what happens.
I got to deflect it. You almost got me though. You threw the fishing rod. No, Joe. I think YouTube already punished us for that. We just can't say the T word, all right? They're going to call it an election ad. God, I'm still sour about that. Third, we got to run through these. We're way behind schedule here. So third, core, recognize Xi Jinping as the core. Alignment, align one's thought, words, and actions with the party. I mean, you get the idea. The four confidences, you say confidence in the path. So the socialist path is the right one. Confidence in the theory, kind of same idea. Confidence in the system, confidence in the culture. So when you read all this and what they're talking about, the way it translates to me is it just sounds like a whole lot of propaganda. We need lots and lots of propaganda in this. We need lots of propaganda up in here. This is what everyone should be thinking. The thing which really struck me is just how much Xi says that he's the core. And it's not just like kind of slightly referenced through here. It's also in there. If you just do a search for his name, it'll show up quite a lot and talk about he's the core and all that. And I couldn't help but be reminded of that Game of Thrones quote, where it's just like, if you have to keep constantly saying you're the king, then you're not really the king. Not to say that's not the case or that he doesn't have a firm hold on power, but I think recently there was a whole quote unquote purging of generals and stuff like that. Let me just be forthcoming. I've got zero insight into Chinese politics. Okay. I don't know. But it did strike me, wow, this guy's sounding kind of desperate.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that struck me, definitely. It's like right up front though. It said Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping, I forget, something related to his name, and then Xi right after.
Right. He's sticking his name up in there. Yeah.
Yeah. He's next.
The thing is, though, even if you just list out those four things, Maoist, Marxist, Leninist, the Deng Xiaoping, and now Xi Jinping, you have to follow all those rules of thought. But there are naturally going to be lots of contradictions in there. There's no way that all of them are consistent across. So what do you do? All right, let's get to with all that aside, let's get to the bull bear paragraph. If you don't mind, why don't you go ahead and read the whole thing, and keep in mind that if it's under 100 words a minute, I'm going to speed it up in the editing.
Sounds
read
good.
it as fast as you can. It's a long one.
All right.
But bear with us. I think it summarizes China's view both on the positive and the negative.
From a domestic perspective, China's economic foundation remains solid with many strengths, strong resilience, and great potential. The supporting conditions and basic trend of long term positive development have not changed. The advantages of the socialist system with Chinese characteristics, the super large scale market, super large scale, the complete industrial system, and abundant human resources have become even more prominent. At the same time, the problems of unbalanced and insufficient development remain prominent, with cyclical, structural, and institutional issues intertwined. Effective demand is insufficient, the contradiction between strong supply and weak demand is evident, and there are choke points and blockages in the domestic economic circulation. The task of converting new and old growth drivers is arduous. Agricultural and rural modernization lags relatively behind. Pressure on employment and growth in residents' income is relatively high, and there are shortcomings and weaknesses in ensuring people's livelihood. Changes in the population structure have raised new issues for economic development and social governance. There are still risks and hidden dangers in key areas, and the task of preventing and resolving risks in real estate, local government debt, small and medium-sized financial institutions, and other areas remains heavy.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. That's been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast. No, I'm just kidding. So you got real estate. The other ones were local government debt and then small and medium financial institutions. So, hey, that's right up our alley. We love fiscal and financial issues.
That's right.
Real estate a little bit. The bull case, and again, I'm more on the bull side. Advantages of a socialist system with Chinese characteristics. So that's China Incorporated, as far as I can tell. I'm not, but I definitely agree. Super large scale market, complete industrial system, and then abundant human resources. That's what, when we're talking about just the fundamentals, I mean, that's what I'm referring to. But let's get into the bear case. To start off with, looking at the supply and demand, the choke points and blockages. So I think the clue here to figuring out what are choke points and blockages have to do with Chapter 17, deepening the construction of a unified national market. And, recall that China operates in a series of provinces, kind of like states. And each of those provinces need to hit certain growth targets. And just reading through sort of section 1 here, which is titled Improving the Basic Institutions and Rules of United National Market, they start making reference to things that sound like problems that other countries have with China. Things like protectionism. There's local, like regional governments, for instance, they're using administrative measures and subsidies and procurement preferences or hidden rules to really favor local firms. Because naturally, if you got a state and you're saying, okay, you got to hit some growth target, then they're going to do sort of the same stuff that China does with other countries. What they're kind of complaining about is that these local provinces are favoring their local companies. The things that they want to write here is they say, quote, strengthen the protection and utilization of intellectual property rights, right? And formulate rules and guidelines for the protection of trade secrets in key areas. That's not referring to foreign trade secrets. That's referring to kind of companies within, I think Chinese companies are stealing trade secrets from other Chinese companies just across provinces.
But they've all got their own targets they have to hit, so they're all motivated to support their own local companies.
Right. And I think that's the cause.
Protect your own versus, collectivist for the country. Exactly.
And so that's what they're referring to, I think, by these choke points, which is interesting. I didn't really respect that.
Yeah. I've never thought about it like that.
Or another item that was mentioned, that was highlighted in that bull bear paragraph, was converting new and old growth drivers. I'm going to ask you to read this part. I think this is an interesting insight into one of the challenges they're facing.
They say to improve mechanisms for monitoring and issuing early warnings regarding production capacity, employ measures such as strategic planning guidance, capacity regulation, price governance, and industry self-regulation to comprehensively address and rectify, quote, involuted, excessively competitive market behaviors.
Yeah. The old growth drivers are bumping up against some issues with just overproduction. People aren't buying it and they're dumping it below cost. The next one I won't spend too much time on. That's the urban-rural, agricultural-rural modernization problem. What they're just saying is that cities are advanced and the countryside is still backwards. Like it's not been even growth. I don't know if you've seen that video. It came across my feed about this guy starting in the center of a city and then driving just 10 minutes outside to a major city and getting into rural China. And he sort of called that real China. I've had similar experiences. I mean, when I was living in China, I had a way to get around, even just on a bicycle. You could just take it. In Beijing, it's just super flat. It's in the middle of a desert. You can easily just go in one direction and just go and go. And it becomes very rural, very poor, very fast. Now, again, this was like 10 years ago. But I guess what they're saying, at least according to this 5-year plan, it's still the case. And according to that video that I watched, they don't spend a whole lot of time throughout the 5-year plan for verbiage on how to combat this. I would argue. The only reason I'm really mentioning it here is because it was in that bull bear paragraph. The other thing I wanted to ask you, is what do you think the rural unemployment rate is? And the answer is we don't know. Maybe there's some number floating out there. I'm not aware of it. I asked my AI friends, and they don't know of one. We know from measuring unemployment in the United States, which we've covered in exhausting depth here, it's very difficult to get good numbers. Very difficult. It's hard enough to do that with 300 million plus people here. Imagine 1.4 billion. Then you lop off the 60 some odd, or you lop off, call it 40% of people that live in rural areas, and you're only looking at people in urban areas. That's still hundreds of millions more than what the US is trying to do. The other thing is if they're trying to hit a certain unemployment number, and if that's also another metric, I would argue just by the fact it's extremely difficult to get those numbers, that also means it's very easy to fudge those numbers. I mean, anytime you're trying to come up with a model, there are a gazillion little decisions you have to make on assumptions. And you can always push them in one direction and even defend it. And when you're blowing up the sample to be so much bigger, to try to represent a huge population from a tiny sample, just a couple little nudges, and you can get an unemployment rate, whatever you want. Anyway, my 2 cents. You're nodding. What do you think? What do you think of that take?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's been a little bit controversial in the US the past few years, just seeing the year over year revisions to the yearly employment numbers being almost a million off, like multiple years in a row now. So that's, the better part of all the jobs created throughout the year. It just gives you a substantially different view of the world. Like in 2024, the labor market looked quite strong, but once we hit early 25 and got the full year revision, it looked much weaker. And at the time, it's so important because sentiment is what rules, financial markets, that trickles through to the economy. If you think the job market's really good, you're going to try harder to get a job. If you think it's really bad, you might try a little bit less, and that's going to make the job market even worse.
All right. The next one they talked about that they highlighted there is unemployment. It's a good transition here, and income inequality. They don't actually use the word income inequality. They want to improve the income distribution system. I'm going to go ahead and say that's probably referring to income inequality. Can you go ahead and read that for me?
Yes. So they're looking to strengthen industry employment coordination, implement actions to stabilize, expand, and improve employment, and continuously enhance policy support for industries and enterprises that absorb a large number of employees, such as foreign trade, construction, accommodation, and catering.
Who would have guessed? I guess those are really, those absorb a whole lot of labor, I guess. Very labor intensive jobs. I wonder what foreign trade is exactly, but construction, I think we knew about. When I think of construction, the first thing I think of had to go back to that episode we did about loans to Africa and how they were also using construction crews to build all that. Accommodation and catering. Catering. Who knew?
Yeah, that last one really threw me off a little.
Yeah. They talk about stabilizing and expanding employment for key groups. So they're looking for college graduates. So this is, I think, a nod in some indirect way to the issue of youth unemployment. They also mentioned migrant workers. So I've heard also from sort of China watchers and talking about the migrant workers going home and not having any work, or they're showing up at a kind of a new city and it's struggling to find work. And veterans, that's an interesting one. One of the metrics here indirectly is to ensure that at least one person in a zero employment household finds employment. That's going to be an interesting one to see implemented. It's like, say, does anyone in your family have a job? No? Okay, you get in the front of the line for something.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works. They want to increase large-scale vocational skills training. I can get behind that. I think the U.S. needs a whole lot of. I literally the other day went up and looked up how to be a electrician, just because I was kind of curious. Like, what are these? It's a long time. It's like 5 years.
Yeah.
It's like 1 or 2 years of training, but then you have to actually go out with an electrician. You have to be an apprentice for 4 to 5 years before you can get a license. So the next one we're going to talk about is the population structure. I asked you earlier at the beginning what you thought the population of China might be in 2050. And rough estimates, they might have 100 million fewer people. They think they might have half that population by 2100 if they keep the same course. All right, last thing here, Joe. So improving the long-term mechanism for preventing and resolving risks in key areas. And then they identify real estate. And all they say is coordinate the orderly resolution of risks in real estate. That's what we got. Not a whole lot there, unfortunately. They get a little bit more in depth for local government. Can you read just this little bit?
Establish and improve a comprehensive local government debt monitoring and supervision system and a long-term mechanism for preventing and resolving hidden debt risks. Strictly enforce financial discipline, resolutely curb new government hidden debt, optimize debt structure of central and local governments, and accelerate the reform and transformation of local government financing platforms. I like that first one. Monitoring and supervision of, coming from financial markets. I picture myself as Xi Jinping with this huge dashboard of all of these province level debt plans, debt outstanding, what everyone's doing with it. So he can just click in very quickly, call up XYZ person in which province and say, listen, too much debt, get that down now.
Yeah, what is hidden debt? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, that one I
that
wasn't quite
sound
sure.
Good. We don't like that. I don't know what that is. Resolutely curb new local government hidden debt. That sounds bad. So they got a problem. Yeah, I guess debt at the local levels. Doesn't sound like they even know what the total debt level is. And then the financial institutions. So here's the next bit. Can you read up to this?
Support financial institutions in carrying out capital replenishment in a stable and orderly manner. Improve the risk disposal mechanism for small and medium-sized financial institutions. Enrich risk disposal resources and means, and replenish the Financial Stability Guarantee Fund, Deposit Insurance Fund, and other industry guarantee funds. Strengthen the coordination of central and local financial supervision, improve the financial consumer rights protection mechanism, and severely crack down on illegal financial activities. Improve the risk disposal mechanism for small and medium-sized financial institutions. I wonder
Don't know
what
that
means.
is. Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Financial Stability Guarantee Funds, deposit insurance, industry guarantee funds. That's, like we've got deposit
Yeah, and
insurance in the
they have
US.
to replenish it. I mean, geez, replenish. What happened? Where'd it go? I mean, that like when so I don't know the answer to that, but question mark. And then, my favorite, severely crack down on illegal financial activities. Yeah, probably should do that. That's going to be cracking some heads on that one. That's not good. People getting rich, people who should not be rich are getting rich.
What was the phrase that she started using like 5 or 7 years ago now about too many people getting rich? Overall prosperity, not
common
the individual
prosperity.
Yes, that's it.
I just looked it up, yeah. So this is a New York Times article from 2021. China's Xi pressures tycoons with, quote, common prosperity talk. He argued that the rapid, uneven accumulation of wealth is threatening social stability in the Communist Party's authority. Yeah. I mean, that's real, man. I got to say, when I was in China, you definitely, in Beijing, where I lived, you would see Ferraris parked. And you would, like I said, ride your bike a little bit and they would just be dirt poor. It is incredibly stark, even more so than if you were driving around like Los Angeles well, maybe honestly, maybe not LA. That'd be pretty stark too. But
I didn't notice the same thing in Tokyo. One of the other interesting things I do know is that in Japan, in the um, employment sector, just like the corporate sector overall, they don't enforce any of these things, but it's just a long-standing, stable thing of very low dispersion between wages. And on the other side, you have like great stability as well in jobs. Like you work for a company and you're there till you retire.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's one thing for income inequality to happen at a very capitalist, like we are, the capitalist or whatever country. But then, you turn around and you see income inequality and stuff like that happen in what's supposed to be a socialist country. To Xi Jinping's point, how much is that going to be undermining the whole China project? This much inequality. This doesn't look socialist. It doesn't look like everyone's equal. Any idiot can just see it. Spend 5 minutes in Beijing and you'll see it. That's all I had for you. We're at like an hour 15.
I mean, I guess I would say one of the biggest reasons that I'm more of a China bear is innovation in general. That is one of their targets that, they want to increase that, but that's something that's very difficult to force, especially like two things. One, that's like one of the biggest drivers of GDP growth, I would argue. You look at the US, the Industrial Revolution, the internet era, we're going into the AI era, just, fabulous growth from that. But those came from like fundamentally new technologies that never existed in the world before. And, being the first mover, you've got a great advantage there. And it's very difficult. And then the second point is that you can't really just mandate that, especially in like East Asian cultures, very generally speaking, where I don't know, it's like the old saying, like the tallest blade of grass gets cut first. You're almost kind of from the socialist thought, you want to stay more in line, whereas by definition, if you want great innovation, you have to, maybe not even rise above, but, veer off somewhere else. Like you have to take risks like that to eventually get to some sort of innovation. And that's one of the core reasons why long term I'm kind of a China bear.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. The thing that sort of I'd say the counterpoint to that and sort of why I'm more of a bull has to do with, if demographics and stuff like that are ultimately destiny. You can look back to the Soviet Union and the US back in like 1975, and you can say they both roughly had the same population. Call it like 225, 250 million. But the Soviet Union's GDP was something like 55% that of the US. So even though, sure, maybe they're not as productive per person, that was with the same population. Now imagine if the Soviet Union was 4 times the size, then you're going to have something 2x the size of the US. So like to your point, yeah, sure, I'll give you that. Fine. But you just can't look past just the sheer size of the market that they mentioned earlier. The market's still there. Number of people are still there. Let's be conservative here and just say it's half as productive, which it's not necessarily going to be. You're still looking at 2x size of the US. Again, all this is out the door if there are robots building robots. But
isn't the Chinese GDP only like 2/3 of that of the US still?
It depends how you measure it. In like PPP terms, they're already bigger. Because everything over there is so cheap. So nominal GDP, US is estimated at 30 trillion. China is the second largest with a nominal estimated at, call it 20 trillion. So yeah, 2/3. Spot on. Good for you, Joe. Kind of nominal GDP terms, by purchasing power parity, China's economy is considered larger, it exceeded the US in 2016.
Interesting.
So PPP, that accounts for cost of living and local prices. But like, I do remember, to like kind of to your point, if we wanted to make a nod there, I remember, back when I was living in China, there were estimates that China's GDP, even on the nominal term, was going to exceed the US by 2020 and 2021. Right. And we're in 2025 and they're still only 2/3 only, quote unquote. So the estimate for when they're going to exceed seemingly keeps to be pushed back. And I guess one of the other big questions I have has to do with every time you're growing at 5%, the actual output has to continuously get larger.
Right.
So now all of a sudden 5% of 20 trillion is a lot bigger than like 10 years ago, 5% of half that. Hell, it's twice as big. It's like the finish line is constantly moving away from you every year.
Right.
So like when the US grows by 3%, China grows by 4%, oh, they're catching up. Well, because the amount that 3% is just a lot bigger.
Level basis.
Yeah. Just physically, it's just a lot more stuff.
Yeah, and that's like one of the other key questions that, like, obviously no one knows, but what's going to be the long-term rate of economic growth for China? Because it's every 5-year plan, they've been, kind of gently pushing it downward a little bit because, even they knew the fabulous growth of the 2000s and even the 2010s wasn't going to be sustainable indefinitely.
Yeah, it was like 10% growth at one point.
Exactly. So like what is like the long-term run rate, throughout the rest of the century, let's say.
Yeah. Anyway, why don't we leave you with that? That's all I got for you today, Joe. Hope that was hope you learned something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this has been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast. My name is Luke.
And I'm Joe.
Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.
See you next time.
Hold on. I said I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
That's all right.
We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.